You're listening to She's Got Drive podcast, the podcast that inspires women to be the driver in their own life through the life and stories of Black women with drive. And I'm your host, Shirley McAlpine. I'm a business consultant, an executive coach, and a leadership facilitator, working with people and organizations to live their lives by design and not default. Welcome back to another episode of She's Got Drive. And as we start June, it really feels like the summer is arriving, and I'm at the end of a very intense 5 months of work. So I'm feeling a little bit of just kind of relief a bit about that. You know, I don't know how you're feeling, but that's what's going on with me. Just a little ease in the work schedule, which is always a blessing to kind of pause and look at that. And we have a very good episode for you today. You know, there are a few times when you meet a person who has experienced being called to her purpose and really also kind of openly shares her resistance to that call. And so we explore that today with my guest, Itang H, or the Reverend Itang H. I'll tell you more about her in a minute, but I'm excited about this really stunning and inspiring woman who really dropped some gems in this episode. So it's a not to be missed one, and I really appreciate her being willing to spend her time with me and being willing to share so openly the way that she came to fulfilling her purpose and working on her purpose, and that a really powerful messaging that comes through that. I'm not going to say any more because I don't want to preempt some of the things that she shares with me, but in the interview, I think you're going to love it and you're going to get a lot out of it. So I'm looking forward to sharing this episode with you. But before we do that, I want to share with you what's been driving me this week. What's been driving me this week is, you know, as you know, this year I've had my focus on my self-care. I've had my focus on like a plan that I've been sharing with you as I go on and adding things to it. And that has actually gone into even sharper focus in the last couple of weeks. I have been diagnosed with osteoporosis in my lower back. If you don't know what osteoporosis is, it's a definition by the World Health Organization is a progressive systemic skeletal disease that's characterized by low bone mass, deterioration of bone tissue, and with the consequence of increasing the bone fragility and the possibility of kind of fractures. So said in simple terms, you know, the density of my bone is reducing, or it's not producing. Your bone turns over every 2 years, and so as the older parts of the bone kind of diminish, the newer parts replenish, and they stay ahead of that's diminishing. And so that's not working in the body like it used to. There are many factors why I think I'm going to share, you know, is largely menopause. I'm 51 years old, a woman who experienced early menopause. And so what that means is your estrogen levels drop dramatically and causes you some issues. Hot flushes being some of them. We all know what happens when we talk about. There's so many things that are talked about with the menopause, and this isn't necessarily one of them that's really focused on. You know, we talk about hot flushes a lot, and because it's a big issue for many women. Needless to say, this news has had a huge impact on me. The window of, what should I say, the statement that came out of the doctor's mouth that apparently it's reversible, was all that he gave me really in that moment. But it was enough for me to leave my doctor's office and immediately get into action. You know, She's Got Drive is not called She's Got Drive for no reason. I really am someone who just is very stands in possibility, but it's very grounded in that. And I immediately look like, how do I reverse this condition, and how do I bring myself and my bone back to where it needs to be, and to stop the progression of this. So within 4 days, I have a had a team in place that's a strength training team to support the rebuilding exercise, extreme exercise, strength building training exercise is important to support the rebuilding of your bone. And so shout out to Ryan and shout out to Aaron, who are my team there. And I went to see a doctor who has put me on another doctor who's put me on a bone supplement kind of protocol that will rebuild the bone. And the exercise is 6 days a week, And I'm sharing this with you because they call it the silent disease, I was lucky enough to have another doctor, not the one who did it, but another doctor who suggested I have a DEXA scan given how early my menopause was. And so through that scan is what we discovered was going on. It's called the silent disease because most people don't discover it until they fracture something and are in pain and go to their doctor and then are finding out the source of the pain. And so I feel grateful for my shout out to my other doctor who really is the one encouraging me to do the scan. Because without that, I would have been none the wiser and not in action on what's happening in my body. I'm learning a lot about it. I'm learning about strength training. I'm learning about diet and how diet impacts it. I'm learning about me rethinking my life and how I live my life and how I structure my life. And it has to be restructured because now I have this routine that I have to get in wherever I am. And how I think about what I'm doing and where I'm doing it. So I'm traveling this road and I wanted to share that because even if you're 25 years old and listening to this podcast, it matters because women peak at their bone density at the age of 25. And so exercise before the age of 25 is critical to ensure that you have good bone density when you're in your menopausal years. We never think ahead of that when we're in our 20s. We think we're invincible. And you might be sitting at home thinking, do I have it, don't I? Well, that's a question, and start to kind of raise our awareness about it. You might be thinking at home saying, I'm living with this. I didn't know I could reverse it. And listen, I haven't done it yet, but I'm certainly on that game. It's going to take 2 years. It's a long journey, but I really believe that I can do it. And I put a good team in place. And what I love about my team is I really feel like they are my partners and in causing this result for me. So you'll see me posting things on Instagram about this because I really feel like women who are in their 50s need to know, because I thought it was something that happened to women or people in their 70s or their 80s, and that's not strictly true. So that's what's been driving me this week. That's going to be driving me for a long time. I'll still be bringing some fantastic women to you through the She's Got Drive podcast, but I'll share my journey. And I want to say that it is my training and who I am and what I've had the privilege to work in that has enabled me to step out of that doctor's office and immediately get into action, get a plan together while still in the impact and the surprise and the shock of it, and still going through my emotional roller coaster around it. But I am someone who needs to know that I can do something. And so I'm really inviting you to send all your healing intentions my way in this journey that I'm on. And anyone who is out there, I'm experiencing similar things or some kind of condition that you're confronting, know that you have the power to respond in the way that will serve you and to look at what you need to do. And I just wanted to share that with you because you'll be seeing me share about that and talk about that, as I journey through the next 2 years with this. And but as I said, primarily still bringing all these wonderful women your way. So that's what's been driving me this week. And in truth, that's what's going to be driving me for the rest of my life as I not just rebuild my bones, but rebuild my life such that it supports this condition so it doesn't get the better of me. So thank you for listening to that portion. Let's move on to the interview. This week, as I said, I've got Itang Young, who is, I had the privilege and the pleasure to interview. And let me tell you something about her. So Reverend Itang Young is one of the most prolific and eloquent preachers of the gospel in this generation. She's dedicated much of her time and talents toward advocating for women and girls in marginalized communities. She currently serves as the Assistant Minister for Youth at the Abyssinian Baptist Church in the city of New York in Harlem. And she works, and her work takes her both locally and internationally. In May 2012, Reverend Young was featured in the PBS Religion and Ethics News Weekly segment on women and theology and ministry. She's also been featured in Bible Girls, Faith and Full View, which is an animated film that offered insight into the spiritual needs of the modern day woman. In addition to a myriad of honors, Reverend Young currently serves as a board member of Sister for Sister, One in the Spirit, and the World of Prayer USA. She was formerly crowned Miss Black Houston in 2004, and in that capacity, she also used her platform to advocate for the holistic development and education equality of young women and girls in communities of color. She's a former engineer. She completed a fellowship at the UN Women in Strategic Partnerships Division. She is a phenomenal woman and really inspiring. I'm really excited to bring you Reverend Itang Young. Itang, thank you so much for being willing to be a guest on She's Got Drive.
Oh, you're very welcome, Shirley. I've been looking forward to the conversation, and I'm excited for what this next hour holds.
Yeah, so am I. Yeah, so we met in February earlier this. Was it February?
Yeah, I think it was either early February or late January.
Yeah, and
right.
And I was fascinated because you're probably the youngest reverend I've ever met. And you're probably number one. And you're probably it's very rare for me to be a black woman who's a reverend. And as well as you being just fabulous,
thank you.
You holding this role made me just think, I have to interview you. So, okay. So share with us how you came, what do you do?
Okay.
And how you came to do what you're doing.
Wow. Okay. That I'm going to tell you now, that's going to be a very, very loaded answer because my path to where I am now hasn't been the straightest. Mm-hmm. I've actually kind of taken a lot of twists and turns, but to get to the answer, I currently serve as the assistant minister here at the historic Abyssinian Baptist Church in the city of New York. I am currently the third woman to oversee the ordinances of the church in the church's 211-year history. Wow. And currently the only ordained female reverend on staff. So my day-to-day job includes overseeing all of the youth activities. So I serve within the capacity of youth pastor. I do sick visits, and just day-to-day administrative tasks, overseeing the budget. I've currently received a new set of work under my ministerial portfolio, and that is managing the operations of the building. We're currently undergoing an IT upgrade, so I've been overseeing that for the last few weeks. Mm-hmm. In terms of how I got to this space, I again took a very interesting path to get here. I did not always, or I don't think I ever had the desire to be a clergywoman or serve in a position of leadership within the church. I grew up in Texas, where it was very, very rare to see a woman in church. So it wasn't really, something I desired. I've always been a very spiritual person, but not necessarily religious. And we can talk a little bit about that if you need me to unpack that. But I always was God conscious, always spiritually engaged, but again, never had a desire to do more than that. I read my Bible, went to Bible study, did the youth groups and the singles ministry, but never in a million years did I, expect to become an ordained reverend, particularly because I went to school, Texas A&M University in particular. I studied in the School of Engineering. So I graduated with my Bachelor's of Science and started my corporate career at the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company in Akron, Ohio. So I had all these lofty dreams of, being that corporate beefcake, stiletto wearing woman, making moves, woman on the go. But then, life happened, and um, there comes a point where you ask yourself, okay, is what I'm doing aligning with my purpose? Am I making a difference? What's the meaning of all this that's going on? So I had a bit of an existential crisis, so to speak, where
And
I got.
what point? How far? I know I'm just interrupting you, but I'm just
Oh, no, it's
wondering,
okay.
like, so there you are at Goodyear. Were you at Goodyear still when you
Yes.
had that
Hmm.
moment? So you've studied, you've graduated, you've got the corporate job, which is what a lot of people are working towards, and then you're delivering your work. At what point? How far in are you in doing your work before you start to have those questions about, like,
Well,
about it?
I think I've always had those questions. I just never made space to explore them. Because when you're growing up, uh, you're taught to go to school, graduate, get a great job, get a house, get married, have children. So
Right.
that's often society's definition, of success. And even though those questions are often at the forefront of your mind and your heart, you kind of push them to the side
Right.
because you're working to attain this 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 illusion of success that may or may not necessarily be what success is for you. I've
Right.
come to understand that success is very different for different people, and how we define it, varies. But we're often pushed, to attain certain things in life. But there comes a time when you really have to get real with yourself about who you are, where you are, what you want out of life, and how you plan to get there. But even more than that, there's a question about, okay, how do I really want to exist in the world? And is what I'm doing helping me to achieve that? And maybe in about year 3 or 4 in my corporate career, I had to, well, life actually set me down and made me, think about those very questions. And in terms of answering those questions for myself, I ultimately decided to leave corporate America. And I started my graduate theological studies at the Union Theological Seminary here in New York. Now, again, I went there to explore the questions that I had and find meaning. But again, never really thinking that, hey, I'm actually going to go and work in a church. I thought that I would get my degree and go back out into the world a bit more focused and with a little more clarity about who I am, how I wanted to exist, and how I wanted to live out my purpose. Not realizing that while we can set a trajectory for our lives, life can also set a trajectory for us.
Right.
We often have an image of what our lives are supposed to look like and where we're supposed to be. Because let me tell you, by 18, I had like the rest of my life like charted out. I'm so type A. So I was like, when I'm 25, I'm going to have this. And by the time that I'm 30, I'm going to have this. And, I'm weeks away from my 35th birthday, and I'm just looking like, oh, child, what were you thinking? Because my life doesn't resemble any of the blueprints that I laid for it. But the thing about life and one's purpose is that it will plan for you and find you even when you don't plan to find it.
Right.
And I just happened to, say, hey, let me just go with the flow, because if I continue to resist, I may not be able to live into those questions that I had been asking myself.
Right. Well, it sounds like that it still takes some courage to listen. As you said, your purpose will come to you, and are you willing to listen? So you get the call, but are you willing to answer the call?
Right.
Whether that's from faith or whether it's just, if we talk about our traditional kind of hero's
Mm-hmm.
journey or heroine's journey, so the purpose is calling you, but our
Mm-hmm.
ability to say, I'm willing to shift how I've designed my life so far and then take another turn. So what was it that allowed you to trust that in yourself to take the turn? Because I imagine people around you are saying, what are you doing?
Yes, some people still ask, what am I doing? There are days when I find myself asking, Itang, what are you doing? Did you hear correctly? And I just want to touch on the listening aspect, because there are times when God speaks, to us, the Spirit speaks to us, the universe. I understand everybody has a different nomenclature. But there are times when, as you say, we don't listen. And then there are times when we listen, but we don't like what we hear. And, that also creates a challenge, so to speak. And at least in my experience, there are a lot of things that I didn't like to hear. Like, what? You mean leave all this that I worked hard for to go to who? I don't know where. And it's that element of the unknown that is often very scary. But you find, as you say, the courage to deal with uncertainty, to walk in the unknown, to explore the darkness. And, darkness is not always bad. Darkness can actually be the place where we develop, where we grow, where we find new aspects of ourselves, new dimensions of our personality, our skills and abilities. So the darkness can actually be a place of, again, of development and growth. But going back again to the listening aspect, I started my career in Ohio, and the company ended up transferring me to Miami, Florida. And I was like, whoa, Miami, I am living the life. Okay. The sun, the beach, just,
Right.
I was, 21, 22, just having a ball. And you hear, okay, Eton, I need you to switch gears. And you're like, what do you mean switch gears? Like, I'm enjoying this. I'm having fun. Like, this is where I want to be. This is why I worked so hard to get here. And you're telling me that I have to shift. And I just remember, getting the same message, but resisting. And there comes a point when your attention is, how do I want to word this? There comes a time where you resist and you just kind of push everything to the side for so long that life will just come with a big bang to get your attention.
Okay.
And it forces you to stop. It forces you to refocus, and it forces you to redirect. And that moment came for me, and I actually had to say, you know what? I will never get to a place of peace and fulfillment in my heart unless I heed myself to what I feel I'm being called to.
Mm-hmm.
So I eventually, left New York. I mean, excuse me,
Miami.
left Miami. I mean, packed up my apartment. I think I gave away 90% of the stuff in my apartment. I sold my car, came to New York with 2 suitcases. Um, and of course, I had, my essentials
Yes.
shipped from Miami to New York, and I embarked upon, my theological journey, and not realizing that it was purely an academic journey. So I realized during the 3 years while I was in seminary, those questions that I, asked and I shared with you earlier, that 3 year time span gave me the space to explore and answer those questions. Um, they always tell us, hey, you have to be careful what you ask for. And that is very true because life will give you what you ask for. You just have to be prepared
Right.
To receive that and engage the process, whatever it may look like when it comes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I was not excited to move to New York City. Uh, Almost everyone I know, they love the shine and the glitter of the Big Apple. I was so resistant to New York City, and that's because my sophomore year in college, I actually studied abroad in Moscow, Russia, at TMGAU, Moscow State University.
Wow.
And I was there studying Eastern European business practices, diplomacy, and law. And so I've always been a lover of travel. I've always had this, wanderlust about life and culture and the people in it. So I decided to uh, come to New York about a week and a half before I was set to fly out to Moscow.
Mm-hmm.
So I stayed in a hotel in Penn Station, and at night I would study the maps so I wouldn't look like a tourist. So I would learn the subway lines because essentially I was here by myself. I didn't know anyone, and I just didn't want to find myself in a bad situation. And I could just remember after about the fourth day, I was like, oh my God, who in their right mind would ever want to live in New York City? And then, of course, fast forward, 8, 9, almost, 10 years, and I'm in the same city that I just said, who would ever live here, right? So my first 2 weeks, I just remember just sitting in my living room, just in tears. I mean, the people were not nice. I was raised in Texas where we're just so hospitable. You go outside, you say hello to someone, they walk right past you, and everybody's just in the hustle and bustle of their day. And what I was missing was that aspect of community, the aspect of connection, and also, the beauty of the local Walmart where you can go and, grocery shop at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. So in New York, there are the bodegas, and it was a real culture shock for me.
Right.
But the thing that really helped me was, I live in Harlem. I've been here for 11 years in the same neighborhood. It was, the church around the corner, which happened to be Abyssinian. So I started going to church and I started to meet people. And there are a lot of, transplants, young professionals who, were in the congregation. So we got a chance to connect. So those feelings of not having a community or not connecting were alleviated, by finding my tribe here at the church. And what also was very interesting was that when I walked in the church, there were 2 women leading the church service that day. And that was the Reverend Dr. Ebony Marshall Turman and the Reverend Dr. Violet D. Slee. There were 4 individuals on staff, but that particular day, the two of them were leading service, and I just said, "Oh my God, this is radical. This is revolutionary."
Yes.
Because growing up, when you did see a woman in the church, she was either teaching Sunday school, working in the kitchen, or serving as the pastor's aide by bringing him water and towels during, the service. Rarely did you see, a woman uh, leading a prayer, or let alone sitting in the pulpit and running the entire service. So I was like, oh, that's great. This is awesome to see, not realizing that eventually one day I would be in that same position.
So at the time you're at the seminary during this
Mm-hmm.
period,
Yes.
you're sitting in church, you're seeing these amazing women, and it's still not connecting yet that you're going to take this on. You're
No, still not connected because I didn't want it to connect. I mean, I'm telling you, I was so
This
resistant.
is the power of our ability to resist the call, right? Resist our purpose, right?
Mm-hmm,
is that we can really have it
in your
that
face,
clearly, literally in your face presented to you, and you're like, yeah,
no,
that's not
I'm
me.
good. I'm good. So, I remember just going, through my own journey, and saying, oh, this is great, this is wonderful to see, but I'm really not about that life. I'm good, with what I'm doing. So I remember, just telling myself, I'm clearly here for the academic experience. I'm going to go back into the corporate world and, do something that integrates, spirituality, whether that, meant going into nonprofit work or, going to be a corporate chaplain. Because people in corporate don't realize how much of their spirit is engaged in the day-to-day work. And they need someone, to talk that through. So I thought that I would maybe do something like that. And I just remember saying, I would never go and work in a church. And never say never, right? Because in our second year, we have to do a practicum, our internship. And there's a wide array of places where one can complete their internship. You can, do it at the United Nations. You could work, in a hospital ward. You can take chaplaincy classes, hospice work. You can work in a school, and of course, you can work in a church. So I was trying to find every opportunity, except for the opportunities in the church. And every internship that I applied for, I got rejected. And I was like, hold on. I have excellent grades. I'm a model student. What is going on?
Right.
And then the one internship that actually came through was an internship for a church. I said, you know what? This is just too much. So, of course, I went kicking and screaming, like I do with most things that are uncomfortable for me. I completed my year practicum. I went back to the seminary. I graduated, and I was still talking crazy, like, oh, I don't want to work in a church, and da 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 da. Long story short, where am I? I'm working in a church.
What was the moment when you gave up? I want to say gave up the resistance to it. What was the moment, or was it a moment where you just kind of how did the transition happen? What was the moment when you thought, I'm just going to go with what I'm being called to do and give up the resistance?
So, right before I graduated seminary, I traveled to Nigeria. My dad is Nigerian. I went there, and this was the trip after he had passed away. So I went there, and it was, just very, very emotional for me. So I was there with my aunt, and I visited my dad's uh, residence, or my dad's old residence. And my family members, please don't think they're crazy when I say this, they actually they buried my father in his bedroom. So they cleared out the room, dug up the cement floor, and buried him in the room. So that was, I guess, his shrine or tomb of sorts.
Right.
So I just remember walking in, and I was just overcome, like, whew, with such emotion. And I asked my aunts to just kind of give me a moment. So they left and closed the door, and I'm just sitting there, with my dad. And, in that moment, I felt like, my dad was telling me, like, don't cry, don't worry about me, I'm good. You just follow the path that lays before you, and you do the best job at it. And I came back, and people were like, "Oh my God, what happened to you? Why are you over in Africa? You just, you're different." And not different in terms of, a physical difference or anything, of sorts, but they're like, "You don't look as heavy." You just look at ease. And I just said to myself, there are some times when you realize that it becomes detrimental to your existence, to your greatness, and to your abilities when you continue to resist it.
Right.
And not walking in those things. And if peace and happiness and fulfillment was what I was ultimately in search of, I couldn't get there by resisting the very things, the very path that will get me there.
Right. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Oh, no problem.
Yeah. I could feel in your sharing, just in as you speak about it, that shift, and and that kind of like the settling in yourself.
Yes, and the thing about the shift and the settling in, it's not this thing that just happens one time. You have to continue to shift, and you have to continue to settle in. Because one thing about our paths and our callings is that we are called. Yes, we have a destiny, right? We have a final destination of where we're, going to end up, and when we walk into the greatness that is our purpose. But there are steps that we have to take to get there,
Right.
And in taking those steps, we're often called to be different things at different times to different people. And so, yes, the call comes, but it's a call that is ever coming, and a call that is ever changing. And so, the skill that one needs to navigate is having the ability to shift. But more importantly than simply shifting is knowing when to shift.
Right.
Because there are times when we can shift too early, and times when we can shift too late. And the task is knowing when to shift at the right times for the right reasons, so you don't miss, what's next.
Yeah. So the tuning into like the signs for the right timing.
Yes.
Because I'm with you. I believe that that we are given signs. We are given, and it's our ability to read them, to not bypass them, to slow down long enough, to, and then if we see it, to then not resist it.
Right. But,
And
you know,
then, like,
it
to
takes,
look at, yeah.
it takes a lot of, because I don't want you or any of the listeners to think like, oh, yeah, you just wake up one day and it's like, yeah, I know how to shift gear one, gear two.
No,
And, you know, I got
no.
this, you
Not
know.
at all, not at all, yeah.
It takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of introspection. It takes a lot of reflection.
Right.
It takes a lot of asking of the hard questions, you know, the questions that we're afraid to ask ourselves and the questions that we're even afraid to ask other people.
Right.
And it takes honesty, you know, to really sit down and say, you know what, girl, you don't have it as together as you think you do. Or, you know, maybe you need to take some time out. Or maybe, you know, you need to journal. Or maybe you need to go and talk to somebody.
Right.
Or maybe you need to forgive. Or, you know, maybe you need to ask for forgiveness. And it's those things that, I mean, and it's not easy because I'm still learning how to shift. And I'm still learning how to settle in because it is a choice that one has to make every day. You know, we talk about success, we talk about happiness, we talk about peace, but I'm finding that those are things that don't necessarily always come to you or handed to you without first making a choice.
Right.
You know, and deciding, okay, well, these are the things that I want to have. But it all boils down to being in alignment.
And I'm hearing like your choice around success is redefining what that is for you and not falling into kind of norms around what success is determined externally outside of you, and that we can buy into that. And it doesn't mean don't have a great house or anything, you know, but it just means that are those things that are things that many of us are chasing. Is that is that really yours to chase, or is there something else that's really yours to define your own success? And then I'm hearing satisfaction, fulfillment, being at peace, being settled in oneself, doing what is yours to do on the planet, are the things that fall into that success definition.
Right. I mean, and don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that you have to totally abandon, you know, the journey to, you know, nice things.
No.
You know, nice, who doesn't want to have a nice home? Who doesn't want to have a nice car? But it's all about balance and balance and keeping the proper perspective on those things. Because what good is, you know, a great home if you have no peace in your heart? You know, what good is, you know, having beautiful things surround you every day, but, you know, you're not happy. And even at, you know, almost 35, I've been there and I've had those experiences. And I just knew that I didn't want that to be, you know, my reality for, you know, the balance of my life. So success for me now is, hey, have I done something to get me closer to the highest version of myself today? Have I done something that will help me get closer to my purpose? You know, when I go home and, you know, lay my head down at night, can I do so with a clear conscience? Right? Can I go to bed knowing that, you know, my heart is in you know, just the right space, you know, and that everything is good. So that's what success is for me. And I know it sounds or may sound a bit cliche, but there's nothing like a clear heart and a clear conscience and a clear mind and peace.
Exactly.
Any day. I would take that any day.
Right. Right.
And that's what I use as my guideposts and, you know, my markers in life is making sure that while I, you know, am internally aligned, that I'm in a position to hopefully make those same possibilities a reality for someone else.
Yeah.
And,
So
you
when
know, go ahead.
so when you're doing your work
Mhm.
as a reverend, and just like you were inspired by these two black women that you saw when you went to church, like, are you conscious of inspiring others in that way? Do you carry that in that way? Because of what the impact that they had on you as well. I'm curious about that.
I don't know if I wake up and say, "Oh, I'm going to be somebody's inspiration today." I think for me, it's just waking up. Um, so one thing I've gotten to the point where I do a morning practice.
Mm-hmm.
So when I wake up, before I touch my phone and look at the Instagram or my Facebook or emails, uh, I rattle off a list of things that I'm grateful for. And then I always say, God, I don't know what my day holds, but allow for me to walk into my purpose and help someone along the way. And whatever that may be, so be it. Uh, so again, I don't know if I would say that I necessarily go out and say, "Oh, I'm going to be somebody's black girl magic today," or "Hey, I'm going to be, somebody's black excellence today."
Yeah.
I just go out and I am Eton, and are people inspired? Yes. I work with an amazing group of young people here at the church. I have an amazing group of colleagues, and Reverend Butts is just he's just an amazing personality and an amazing boss to have. But when it really becomes real for me when I engage in my international development work, which I failed to mention earlier when you asked me, what am I doing? I do so much that I can't remember half of the things that I'm doing. So in addition to my work here at the church, I serve as the executive director for the Abyssinian Fund. And the Abbey Fund is a 501c3 organization that is affiliated with the Abyssinian Baptist Church that was established in 2009 to help reduce poverty in East Africa. Mm-hmm. So we work with coffee farmers in a rural region in Ethiopia called Shafajaneta. We provide resources and the tools that they need in order to experience some equity in their agricultural work and endeavors. And we also provide assistance to an all-girls school, the Mathuki Secondary School for Girls in rural Kenya, in Kitui. It's about 3 or 4 hours outside of Nairobi proper. So one thing that we've done over the last maybe year or so is that we're helping them build a computer lab. It's all girls school. And I go to, at least for the last 2 years, 3 years or so, I travel to both Ethiopia and Kenya about every 3 or 4 months. Okay. But my travel here lately has slowed down a bit. We bring laptops, so we have a laptop drive before every trip. So I stick about 20 laptops in my carry-on bag, and I'm sure they're thinking, "What is this? What is this woman smuggling?" Right? And then, yes, I'm the one in the airport TSA line who's going through with all the laptops. Right, people are mad, and yeah. So, but when I get off the plane and I take that 3-hour drive down a dusty road. The roads are not structured. The infrastructure is not what we're used to here in the States. But once I get to the school, all sweaty, and I see all these young girls who are focused on getting an education, and they're just so grateful. That's when it really hits me, and it's like, oh wow, I am really out here making a difference. Yeah. And but on the day to day, I just think, hey, I'm here and I'm working, I'm living, I'm just living my life, and doing what I'm supposed to do. And then you have those moments when you're out in the front of a school in rural Kenya with a group of, 250, students, and it really hits you like, wow, like, okay, interesting. And it's scary at the same time, because you never want to take that for granted, your ability to inspire and encourage someone else, for granted. I think it's a very sacred, thing. And I just always want to be mindful that I am being the best steward of that ability.
That's so great. So your work is far-reaching, of course, in that way. And, so then help me understand then what's your biggest challenge that you face, or the biggest challenge that you face in the work that you do? What would you say?
Oh, wow. So I don't think there's one biggest challenge.
You can name one of the many.
One of the biggest challenges. I'm going to take this from a personal perspective. My biggest challenge is reminding myself that I have everything that I need in terms of my own gifts, my own talents, and my own abilities to get the work done. Oftentimes, you can get into spaces that you've never been in, spaces where you have been in and you're the only one.
Right.
Spaces that you haven't seen anyone in your family in, and it's foreign, but recognizing that, hey, I'm enough. And the fact that I'm here shows that. Right. Now, that doesn't mean that, I'm beyond asking for help, because I'm not beyond further development. But just reminding myself that even when other people feel like I'm not old enough, or I'm not prepared enough, or whatever, wherever they feel like I'm not enough, I have to remind myself that I am.
Right. Yeah, your work is going to take you to spaces unknown too, right? Like,
yes.
So that is so important to have that, the ability to remind yourself, and to the ability to intervene our own thoughts, our own concerns, our own feelings. Yeah. So then, my other thought, I was trying to figure out, like, what are the types of experiences that you would say that you've experienced as a Black female reverend that others may not experience? Am I imagining, because it's so unusual, and a young one. Am I putting something there that's not there? It's so unusual. I'm always fascinated by that. How does, like.
So how do people respond?
How do people respond, and how do you respond to how people are responding?
I can remember we were doing a Christmas toy drive at a well-known establishment downtown New York. And I've been communicating with the coordinator of the event, via email and whatnot. So the evening comes for the program, and I walk up to check in. And I said, hi, I'm, here for, such and such a person. And they're like, oh, hold on one second. Let me go get them. So the person comes, and I introduce myself. Hi, I'm Reverend Young. And the person responded, oh, I was expecting to see a man. And I was like, oh, well, I must be a good looking man, and I understand, where they're coming from, but it's like, some people just don't know what to expect.
Right.
And then being a reverend who, has come in from a different, vocation, working in the sciences,
Yeah.
being bicultural, having an African father and an African American mother.
Hmm.
And the way I express that, there are times when I come to church and I wear my African head wrap, or, I'm in, my big gele, and,
Right.
I'm eating, my African food for lunch, and people are like, oh, what's that? Or even when I'm out, it's very interesting because people always ask, oh, well, what do you do? And now I've just started to have fun with it. So instead of, saying, oh, yeah, I'm a reverend, I'll say yes. And I'll give them, 3 tries.
Right.
And even after 3 or maybe 10, they still don't get it. And then when I say, oh, I'm a reverend, they're like, oh my God, you're not a reverend? It's like, yeah, I am. And they're like, it's really hard for them to reconcile. Like,
Right. Right.
you
Well, it's
know,
also, this number one, it's like you just don't meet black women who are reverend. You just don't. There's, there's not. Number two, you're so fly too. I mean, you're
thank you,
so
thank you.
stylish. You're stunning. You got, so even if we were going to imagine a reverend, we wouldn't imagine
Me.
you,
Right.
it's, listen, that's on our training, our society, our
Right.
socialization. We've been socialized to believe that, those who can guide us around our faith and our
Hmm.
spirituality look a particular way.
Right.
And so that's and, have, there's certain age, there's certain gender. And if
Hmm.
they fall into then they have this image that is not you. And
Hmm.
so it really usurps all of those things when
Hmm.
there you are saying you're a referee. It was like, I don't understand, this isn't comforting. You know what I mean? And it's just so fabulous because it really
Hmm.
challenges those norms, it challenges the stereotypes, and it has us really think about ourselves. Like,
Right.
there we are, we swallowed that too. And then, like, here you have this fabulous Itang just in front of us, you
Mhm.
know and here she is representing the faith community. Now, can
Yes.
you distinguish the difference between, because we had this conversation before,
Hmm. Hmm.
between a pastor and a reverend, for
Okay.
those who, because I said you're a pastor and you said I'm not a pastor, I'm a
All
reverend,
right.
and I was like,
No,
yeah.
that is a totally different calling. I do feel that there is a very special call to be a pastor. And, if we're, being honest, I am not quite sure that I have it. So,
Mm,
um, but a pastor is one who has their church, or who has their own church.
mm-hmm.
And a reverend just typically works in a church, but they're not the leader of the church.
Right.
So, but reverends are pastors, ordained. Some have gone to seminary, some have not. But one of the requirements here for Abyssinian is that you have to be, seminary trained. And the other thing is that, and this is not like a clear rule, but Reverend Butts is very big on faith and education. So he encourages all of us to get our terminal degrees.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm excited to share that I'll be starting my PhD studies in September.
Oh,
So, thank
congratulations, that's
you.
wonderful.
Um, so that's the primary difference, is that one person is simply ordained to
Mm-hmm.
oversee church ordinances
Mm-hmm.
versus one who is ordained to do the same, but who also leads a church.
Right. Thank you
Yeah.
for that distinction,
Mhm.
because I didn't know that distinction. And for some people, listeners, because, well, how comes you didn't know? Totally different
I mean, it
track that I've
happens.
been, faith
Yeah.
track that I'm on. So if we, like, I'm looking at the time. There's a couple of things I just want to, like, a couple of things I want to ask you.
Okay.
I've asked all my guests, like, what has been the most courageous moment that they've had in their life, and the courage for me is a an act that they've taken that's from their heart, not just, it may be on behalf of themselves, but it could have been on behalf of another. So I'm just like, when I ask you that, what comes to mind is the most courageous moment?
I think for me, the most courageous moment was deciding the type of woman I wanted to be and really charting out what it would take for me to get there. And I just saw your head tilt, like, what do you mean? There are times when we have to make a decision. Hey, do I want to keep just kind of having this mundane experience? Do I want to remain in the boxes that people have created for me? Or do I want to be the type of person who marches to the beat of their own drum, who is an independent thinker, but who walks in that? Someone who is not afraid to be themselves, to be vulnerable, to not have to, as we say, as my young people say, perpetrate the fraud, and who can just be free and who they are, and be free in what they were created to do. And again, I know it probably sounds so cheesy, but that's a really hard thing to do. When you've had certain life experiences, when you occupy certain spaces and people tell you how you need to exist, just being able to have the courage to defy all of those things, and knowing that there are times when you will not have anybody's support, that you will be out on the front lines by yourself. I mean, those are very lonely places to be, which is why people don't
do it.
Right.
Right.
And so to be able to say, you know what, I'm going to do this thing. I don't care what anybody says about me. I mean, yeah. And it takes a lot of mental strength, a lot of emotional strength, again, a lot of rawness, a lot of honesty with oneself, and just being real about, the parts of you that may not be great. And, the parts of you that are, I don't like to use the word broken, but the parts that are, chipped or fragmented, or, not whole or not healthy, and taking the steps to get to that place where you could be the best version of yourself as possible. Right. It takes a lot of courage to do that.
Right. And the ability to kind of really look at those places that, I don't like the term broken, but the things that, the parts of ourselves that we don't really necessarily want to look at, and but they're all part of us, and we can embrace that, all of that. So it doesn't sound, I mean, that is so courageous. It is, because when your environment is like, are you doing what are you doing? What do you mean you're gonna what? Then of course the ability to stand in your own
truth,
standing in your truth. That's right.
And your own beauty, and whatever your own is, being able to stand in that is making the choice to stand in that is the most courageous thing that anybody can do.
Well, I'm appreciating so much what you shared, because that battle for your true self, is sometimes not everyone gets to win that battle, to really find that, and they live a life that's not theirs, or they live a life and they don't know how to get to a place where they're feeling more at one with who they are. So I really appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, I mean, and don't get me wrong, I don't want it to sound like, I won the battle. It's a choice that you have to make every day.
Yeah, like it's an ongoing one. It's an ongoing one.
Yeah.
So then if you had to give advice to a younger you,
I
love this question. What advice would you give? What advice would you give a younger you?
So I'm going to phrase this in the answer as one of my favorite quotes, and it's by Rainer Maria Roque.
Mm-hmm.
And the quote says, "Be patient towards all that's unsolved in your heart and try to love the questions themselves. Do not now seek the answers which cannot be given to you because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything, live the questions." And
I love that.
that has really just been one of my guiding posts, just being patient. Especially since I moved to New York 11 years ago, I have gotten so impatient, where, I used to be, real cool, okay, I'm good. But once I got to New York, whew, it's like everybody's honking horns and everybody's moving. And it's like, I'm just like, oh my God, I've caught the bug of impatience. But um, just remembering to be patient. I would tell my younger self that it gets better.
Mm-hmm.
If something doesn't happen, it gets better.
Yeah.
And just embrace the beauty of time. I'm really, and I was saying to myself the other day, like, geez, it took me almost 35 years to get this. That I would tell my younger self to embrace the beauty of time, that everything happens in time, on time, and at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
And I am really seeing that evidence in my life right now. So that's what I would tell myself, and that it'll be okay, and live, enjoy life. Um, you know, yeah.
They're all beautiful pieces of advice. I love the notion of the question, and that we, even when we're sitting in the inquiry of the
Hmm.
question, there's so much for us in it, and it's not like a moment, like we can sit with a question for a while, right?
Right,
And the
right.
discovery that comes from that process
Hmm.
versus just where we want to get to some end somewhere, but can we sit in the and allow for those questions to arise for us to answer.
Yeah, and not only
So
can we sit and await for those answers to come versus going out and making our own answers,
right.
because I'm guilty of that. I'll put both of my hands up on that one, and we may need to have a part two. Um, but being able to trust the process,
Right.
and it's in the process that I believe our answers come.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, trust
I'm
in the
with you.
process.
I'm with you
Mhm.
on that.
Yeah.
Well, that was the fastest
Ah,
hour. I cannot tell you. This is such a beautiful time together. Thank you
I
so much.
know.
Thank you
This was
so
good.
much. It was really, really wonderful. Really, really
Yes.
wonderful. And well, I hope to see you soon on
Yes.
my
Yes.
one of my Harlem visits when I hang
Yes.
out in Harlem. And
I am here and I'm around. And if you ever want to chat again, I'm here.
yes,
Yay!
thank you so much. It was brilliant. Thank you so much for being a guest. It was so good. Well, what a wonderful interview. I decided not to cut this one. I know it's a long one, but I just wanted to go with the flow on this one. So it's a long one, but there were so many inspiring things that Itang shared with us, the Reverend Young shared with us, and you know, that quote around the being in the question, and just the ability to dwell in a question and then find your answer in a question, like that's the inquiry, the space in between where you want to be and where you are now, and how powerful that space can be. And I feel like I'm living that right now, so that's kind of resonating a lot. And the other is, I really, really appreciated Reverend Young's openness in saying sometimes when we have a call and we answer the call, we are choosing that each day. it isn't like you get to a place like I've answered the call and I've arrived and that's it. Like, it is a choice, and that sometimes we resist the call, and that's just part of the process to get in there, I guess. So I've taken so much away from this episode. I appreciate Reverend Young so much for her pearls of wisdom. Listen, when you see pictures of her, she's also so fly, so stunning, and I just love her. So I thank you so much for being a guest on She's Got Drive. And if you are enjoying this show, would you head over to iTunes and rate and review the show? You know, it really helps to increase its popularity and people getting to see She's Got Drive and listen to it. And so please rate and review the show. Tell me what you're getting. And then, you know, I appreciate that. Love that. I love reading your comments. I love reading your messages that you send me as well. So She's Got Drive is produced by Cassandra Voltolina. The music is by the awesome or female band Blonde. The song is called Circles. If you want to connect with me, you can do so via Instagram on my account, Shirley McAlpine, or you can go to the Facebook page, She's Got Drive Podcast, and leave comments there. Or you can always go through my website, is shirleymcalpine.com. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, go well and stay well.